We live in a culture that glorifies intensity. Work harder, train harder, push further. We all heard that right from our childhood. But what if success is not just about going all in one thing and neglecting everything else, right? What if the real mastery is a balance built through the moderation? So today we will explore success through that doesn't cost you your health, your family, and obviously yourself. So, hey, dear listeners, welcome back to another powerful episode of Mind Meets Machine, where we explore the performance, leadership, and the human potential in a world that constantly demands more. I'm your host, Avik, and today I'm joined by a lovely guest. Please welcome Mike Barefoot. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Amazing, amazing. So, dear listeners, before we get into the more discussion, I'll quickly have to introduce you with Mike. So, Mike is an entrepreneur, business leader, speaker, and the martial artist with over 27 years in the staffing industry. So, he has placed more than 1,000 professionals in IT roles, generated over $50 million in revenue, and earned multiple industry honors, including the President's Club and the Performer of the Year. And outside the boardroom, he's a seventh degree black belt in karate and holds advanced degrees in jiu-jitsu and kickboxing, with nearly 4 decades of martial arts discipline behind him. Yeah. So his philosophy is very, very simple, but yet definitely powerful. Like help others succeed, pursue excellence with integrity, and also use moderation to build the balance. So I'll not take much of your time. Let's get started. Welcome to the show again.
Thanks. Thanks so much. What you said as an introduction really resonates with me because earlier this morning I was reading an article. There's an entertainer in the U.S. His name is Ray J. And there was a whole article around him where he's just suffered health setbacks because he's pushed himself so hard as an entertainer in different areas where we have the American philosophy of work harder. If you're feeling tired, drink more coffee. If you're doing this, keep pushing hard. And he just got out of the hospital and was performing, even though he almost died with a heart problem and pneumonia. And he's just gotten out, and he was talking about he needs to cut back, and he's out there performing with attachments to his body that helps facilitate his healing. And what he should be doing is probably convalescing and getting better. But I think that's the mantra. And what you're talking about and what I'm trying to emphasize is you can be successful, but they were also talking about in the article how much we need to offset how hard we work with having some downtime and other pursuits that, the body needs rest, regardless of, if you think you can just push through it, you're going to pay dividends one way or the
Mm,
other, whether it be in the short term, intermediate term, or long term. You're going to have adverse results if you don't have some moderation in tow.
I agree. I totally agree. So, I'm curious, like, when did you realize that chasing success without the balance can quietly undermine everything else?
I think I had remnants of it throughout my life. My dad was a great inspiration to me and told me that moderation is the key to success and the key to life. But I was one that was prone earlier in my career to work the 60-hour weeks and sometimes more than that. And I was still trying to juggle all the things I'd done. You'd mentioned I have an involvement in martial arts. I was involved heavily in my son's life in terms of helping him with his pursuits. I think there's as I've stepped back and I've achieved certain things that I've felt happy with in terms of extrinsic factors and external success, I think I've also realized that it's not everything. If you don't have your health, you have nothing. And you can achieve all these things, whether it be monetarily, professionally, having a certain acceptance or people viewing you a certain way. But that really means nothing in the bigger scheme of things if you don't have intrinsic fulfillment, if you don't have happiness, if you feel like you're constantly under the gun and you've got to go from one task to another, you can't really experience fulfillment if all you're thinking about is the next thing you're going to. So I think there's got to be some balance in your life. And that's why I've tried to, I've had, pursued things academically to prepare me for professional life. I've gone after, my professional life very hard. And then I would go to, like you'd mentioned, President's Club. And that was a great achievement. I've gone multiple times in my career, and I would get with all these type A, personalities that are overachievers, and we'd be there for awards banquets. And you realize sometimes, as successful as they are in what they do in selling, there are things that are missing because they put other things on the back burner that are so consequential in their lives, my lives, your life. And, at the end of the day, you're never going to see on someone's headstone in the graveyard, I wish I'd worked more. I think a lot of times we get to a point where we work so hard and we try to achieve so much that we let a lot of things suffer, whether it be our family relationships, our personal relationships with friends and significant others. And then, we look back and reflect after a certain point or juncture in our lives, and we go, was it really worth doing this to get this? And I missed out on this opportunity with my kids, or I didn't go on this vacation where I could have, had some downtime and been more plugged in and focused when I came back to work. And instead, they've done studies where you could work more than 40 hours a week, but production diminishes greatly after that 40 hours is accomplished. And what I'm trying to tell people is still work hard, working, just be more plugged in and focused. And when you're off the job, be just as focused on enjoying that downtime so that when you come back, you're going to be that much more energized. You're going to be that much more focused. And as opposed to putting in 10, 12 hours a day, put 8, 9 hours a day and be very focused towards the goals that you're trying to accomplish. And then the reward is the downtime and the other things that you're doing. Because I look at work as just a sliver of the pie, and the money that you make with it is just a sliver of the pie. But if you realize in accordance that everything else feeds one another, if you're more happy with your personal life, if you're in better shape physically and health wise, if you have other interests and hobbies, that's going to make you more energized and overlap to make you even more successful. And you're working to live as opposed to living to work.
Mhm. Totally agree. Ooh, and that this belief that to win in business, something else must suffer, that family time, health, relationships. So, which is very common these days, and most of the corporates I have met, they also kind of have things in their mind like this, that okay, but I have to achieve this, I have to complete this, but I don't have much time for my family or something. So, why do you think that we have normalized this trade-off?
Well, I think it's a gradual shift
Hmm.
in our mindset over decades. There was a movie in the 80s, called Wall Street that was made by Oliver Stone, and and Michael Douglas played the villain in it on Wall Street and said, "Greed, for lack of better words, is good." And I think we've taken that aspect and we've prayed at the altar of, who am I in terms of other people's perception? Who am I in terms of how much money do I have? How big is my house? How big is, or how many cars do I have in my driveway? How many,
Hmm.
Herm Edwards, who coached in the NFL, played in the NFL, coached at the collegiate level. I don't know if he's still doing it, but he was brought back for several years to the NFL rookie camp to talk about, because an NFL player's career only lasts 3.5 years on average. And, people get these huge contracts in pro sports and they go, well, I'll buy a Rolex and I'll buy multiple watches and I'll buy multiple homes and I'll buy multiple cars. And Herm Edwards said, how many houses can you live in at one time? And he'd say, people would, reflexively respond with only one. And he'd say, well, how many watches can you wear at one time, or should you wear at one time? And most people would say one. Well, how many cars can you drive at one time? And they'd say one. So he'd say, why do you need all this extra? Because that just builds it, and the studies are also true that within 5 years, most pro athletes are destitute and broke because they've spent so much money and they've made, as we were talking about, money and the way they're perceived by the public, what they should live up to in terms of the standard. And then you find the guys that I've seen an article and I've saw some information where Larry Bird was very frugal with his money during his playing career. I don't know what his net worth is exactly, but I saw where it was like $80 million. And he would have guys walk into the locker room with the Boston Celtics wearing fur coats. And he lived in a regular, it was a nice house, but it was not a mansion. And he cut his own grass. And he said, you guys are going to need money later. And he said, and I'm not going to loan it to you. And inevitably, they did come back and ask for money later. And he said, I told you, I'm not giving it to you because if I give it to you, somebody else is going to say, well, you gave it to him. Why aren't you giving it? And so he has seen a lot of those guys go by the wayside. And I think that's part of the problem. We get so caught up into following the Joneses and trying to live up to what we think success is. And success should be what you think it is. One person's floor is another person's ceiling. So just because I view something as being successful doesn't mean that that's your value system. And if you think it's successful for you to do this, there's nothing wrong with that. All I've tried to get across is be successful. That's been one of my, credos or mantras that I've tried to live by during my career. But I've also, as time goes on, there's no replication for life experience and time. I've also tried to take into effect, there's got to be some time to enjoy what you've acquired or enjoy what you've done and to appreciate it and to understand that, there's only one, February 17th, 2026, and you're not going to get it back. You got to enjoy it and make the most of it. And if you don't get that time back. You can get money back. You can get other things back, but you can't get time. And I think people need to be or look at that as their highest asset. And it is an asset that's not retrievable. And in doing that, you got to make the most of that. And it's not all about work. It's not all about making money. It's not all about, I just think that you should have a balance in your life and you should develop outside interests. And again, if your interest is this and it's a decent thing that you want to do, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think you should use it to replenish yourself and make yourself a better whole person as opposed to being a fragment of a person.
Very important. Wow. So, have you seen the high performers reach impressive financial goals, but they feel internally out of sync?
I have. And being in sales, that's inevitable. You're going to come across, being in sales for, over a quarter of a century, I've come across different types of salespeople. We all, for the most part, tend to be type A personalities that are very aggressive and go after what we want, achieve what we want. That's the thing that's funny about President's Club. When you get there and they're all the top achievers from your company and you're all there for the awards banquet, you all tend to ask each other, well, how did you do in your market this year in Chicago? How'd you do in LA? How'd you do in New York? How'd you do in Miami? How'd you do in, and it goes on and on and on. And after 3 or 4 days of that, you get where I would sometimes leave President's Club after the awards banquet and go to another resort so that I could get away from the business talk. Because that's all it turns, and that's like, I'm talking about work in a nicer environment and I'm getting 5-star meals and it's 5-star accommodations, but I'm talking about work. So sometimes after the award banquet, I would leave and check out and go to a hotel that was down the street that was a really nice hotel, because typically nice hotels are going to be close to other nice hotels just so that I could have some time to enjoy being in Jamaica or being in Palm Springs or being in Cancun, Mexico, and it not be all about work. Again, I think I've had that always in the back of my mind, but I've really taken and embraced it with both hands as I've gotten more established in my career. I think there's always that early part in your career where you're trying to establish yourself and you have that anxiety, which is natural, and you have that fear, well, if I don't put in this or I don't do that, I'm not going to reach this milestone or set of milestones that I want for myself to be happy. But I think as I've gotten more entrenched and reached certain goals, whether they be internal goals, or whether they be financial goals, or whether they be whatever goals they may be, I think I've also become a little more introspective and realized that there's got to be harmony and there's got to be balance. And if you have that, you're going to be a happier person from a lot of different perspectives. And to answer your original question, I remember there was a sales rep that would come in at 7 o'clock. He didn't work in my market, but it was almost mythic, because when we're all salespeople, we're all high achievers. We're all known for going the extra mile. But this guy, we worked commission only, and he would have two personal assistants, and one would do his recruiting for him. Another one would call the candidates. He would be on the phone making sales calls to clients, and he would come in every day and list the day and say, at the beginning of his day at 7 a.m. in the morning, my name is so and so. I'm in the office today. I'll be here until 7 or 8 o'clock. You can reach me at this number. And so he would put in 12, 13-hour days regularly. And I saw him make $1 million a year for himself. And this was 20 plus years ago. So we're talking about $1 million when it would be multiple millions today. And he had assistants that he was paying for out of his own money so that he could do extra work. So he'd have resumes brought before him by one assistant that was budgeted to be taken out of his money that he was getting. And he would review the resumes and say, send this one, don't send this one, send this one, don't send this one, write the cover letter. And it would look like it came from him because it was on his computer. And then he'd have another one and he'd say, oh, these candidates look great. Get calls out to them. And then he would be on the phone trying to get with customers and close deals. And he did very, very well at it. I don't know what he's doing in his recent history, but, when you're spending, 12 or more hours every day, year after year, something's got to go get, something is lacking in another area or facet of your life. So did he probably make more money than most of us out there? Absolutely. But did some things have to go lacking because there's only a finite amount of time in a day? I think absolutely is the other answer that goes with that.
Exactly. And obviously, so the achievement without alignment doesn't necessarily equals the fulfillment. So that's very true. And so if someone was listening, wants success but fears of losing themselves in the process, then what will be the first mindset they should make? What do you think?
Well, I think anything you do starts with passion. If you're not going to be all in, it's like playing cards. You play poker, you play blackjack, you play whatever. And I'm not a big card player, but when you play, you've got to be all in. And I'm not saying not be all in, but just choose a certain amount of the day to be all in, and then know when to cut it off and to move into other disciplines or interest in your life. And that makes you more replenished and more plugged in, so that you're more hyper focused the next day for that 8 or 9 hours that you choose to be involved. And then, kind of monitor yourself to know, hey, am I going, now I'm starting to get in the 10-hour window of working. Now it's pushing into 10 and a half and 11. My productivity is probably going to fall off because I'm tired after that 9 hour mark. When is it becoming, where you're beating yourself down and there's long-term repercussions with your health and other areas, and relationships that suffer also, and other things that go by the wayside, where you could have gone home, enjoyed some downtime, whatever, and doing whatever that may be, and then come back in and realize, I'm going to give you the best 8 or 9 hours that I've got the next day and every day, as opposed to being, where you're just spending, it becomes the tail wagging the dog instead of the dog wagging the tail. You want to be where you're engaged when you're at work, but there's got to be a cutoff period or cutoff time where you say enough is enough, and I'm going to go on to my other pursuits. And those other pursuits are going to overlap and make me stronger because I'm more fulfilled when I come back to the job again.
And so, like, you have helped thousands of professionals clarify their goals. So, what will you say? Like, how can someone define their version of success instead of inheriting someone else's?
So I've always thought one person's floor is another person's ceiling. For instance, if you're not good with interpersonal relationships, or that's And that's not usually something that goes with sales. If you're good in sales, you're usually good with interpersonal, aspects in terms of dealing with people, because that's what makes you successful is you're able to sell not just the product or service that you're selling yourself to go with it. But a lot of times people will negate the people at home, or they'll become the person that they don't put as much effort into because they've put so much effort into the job itself that they don't have anything to give when they get home. It's like a sponge where all the water's removed, and they don't have any more water to give, or more effort to give, or more time and gratitude and things of that nature. So my thing is, one, you need to be passionate. Secondly, you've got to be not only passionate about the subject or what you're trying to do professionally, but you've got to be, all in terms of work effort. And when you put those two aspects together, they say genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. So when you're there, you've got to be totally engaged. But when you're finished, you've also got to be engaged in the other aspects of your life. And that means whether it be physical activity or health, or whether it be a relationship with a significant other. I belong to a National Speakers Association, and I just talked to a woman that is engaged with some football programs in our area where it's college football. And the coaches are working so hard that they've got fold-out beds in their offices and are sleeping at their offices. And the person was telling me that the divorce rate is like 60 to 80% because they have no time for their spouses and significant others and their kids. And when you think about it, is being a successful coach or successful whatever profession you're in worth the sacrifice of losing your wife, the relationship you have with your kids, or whatever, and you just are a person that comes in and out the door periodically, and you don't really know them, and you're just kind of of who you are when you're there. And secondly, you're just kind of a visitor. It's not really your home. It's just a place you go and have your stuff, but there's a difference between a home and a house. And I just believe that, again, sometimes you have to decide what's important for you. If you're going to be a single person and the job's going to be your total life, then maybe you shouldn't get married. Maybe you shouldn't have kids, because you're not going to have the energy nor the time to give to those outside those boundaries and parameters of the job. So I just think it's about being balanced and achieving as much as you can in every area that you can. And I believe there's ways to do that, but you've got to figure out a formula that works for you. But it can't just work for you. It's got to work and galvanize the people around you. And all those people have to feel like they're a part of the process and a part of your solution and their solution too.
I agree. And so even with the intention, like life can become unbalanced quickly. So
Yes.
especially in competitive industries. So
Yes.
what practices help you recalibrate that?
Yeah, I've always been athletically inclined. Whether when I was younger, I pursued basketball, and then when that ended, a friend of mine got me into lifting weights, and then later on, I got into martial arts. And I enjoy sports, and I like concerts and movies and anything entertainment centric and oriented. So I believe you just you have to allot the time and make the time for, it's got to be just as much a precedent. It's got to be just as much a priority for you to have time outside of the workplace as the time in the workplace. Because if that's where all your, and I've had it the other way around. I've had focus, times in my life, like you said, it can get out of balance and out of whack, where I wanted to be the performer of the year. And
Yeah.
I became performer of the year on multiple occasions. And I achieved certain things. Matter of fact, the chair I'm sitting in right now is an award I won for being performer of the year, with one of the companies I worked for. And I've had this chair for 20 years or over 20 years, because it's a great chair. It's a Sealy posture, office chair. It's a phenomenal chair, and it conforms to my body because it fits. But, when I think back about it, no one but me are going to remember the years that I was performer of the year, or I was rookie of the year, or I was President's Club winner. So you have to realize that at that time, those things seemed like everything to me. And if I didn't accomplish it, I was a failure. And it can't be an all or
Exactly.
nothing equation. I mean, at the end of the day, I have to go back and look at the awards and remember which years I won for because they're a while back. So obviously, it can't be that important in the big scheme of things in terms of life because if I have to go back and look at what years I won certain awards, I'm sure nobody else that I work with remembers what years I won. So, you learn, I think, through time and you go, I did this again and I won this and I went to another company and I won this. But in the big scheme of things, who remembers and what does it mean? And, does it make me a better person? Nah. Does it make me a more influential person? No, I can use it as a great thing to say on my resume. And you brought it up at the beginning, and it's something I have mentioned,
Mm,
before. It's part of my resume. It's part of who I am. I won't take that away. But does it make me a more significant person? Absolutely not. In the big scheme of things.
okay. That's really lovely. Ooh, so one thing, I mean, if you can share, like for someone who is listening, who is chasing the ambitious goals right now, what will be the one hottest question they should ask themselves to ensure that they are not um, sacrificing what matters the most?
Well, one of the things that I would encourage people to do is ask themselves, we all have our own litmus or benchmark or set of parameters that we grade ourselves with. Am I a good enough person because of this? Am I a better person because of this? And I think integrity has got to be at the top of the list. If you don't have personal integrity with what you're doing, meaning you're doing it the right way, you're not stepping on someone or to get to the next level, or you're impugning someone else to accomplish the goals that you're trying to meet. You got to ask yourself if you're doing it the right way, because in the end, that's really what's going to matter. Because you got to look at yourself in the mirror and you've got to ask that question: did I do the best that I could? Was I all that I could be? And did I do it within the ramifications and within the parameters of what was right? And if you can say that and look yourself honestly and know that you did the very best that you could do for yourself and those around you, that's really the mark of success. Is the dependency or dependability on yourself that you have, and are you reliable to those around you? Are you consistent with those around you? And if you can say yes to all those things and still be successful, I think you've hit the mark in multiple ways and multiple levels. That's what I've taken away from going through the process. I've always tried to have a certain standard, like I wasn't going to compromise my principles in order to achieve certain things. And I think that's the thing you have to have in tandem, because there are a lot of people that are successful, but they've either taken shortcuts or they've done things to other people that are not, with integrity to get to where they are. And that's kind of an empty vacuum in terms of accomplishing things. But are you really a whole person? And I'd say the answer is no. But if you can say you've done everything the right way and, or as much as you could, nobody's perfect, but as much as you could within reason, and you were still successful, that's the ultimate sense of accomplishment to me. Because one, the most important thing is you did it the right way. Secondly, you achieved the goal you want to achieve. But again, the fundamental, the steps, the pillars, the foundation of achieving that goal was you did it the right way, like through good principles and fundamentals.
Amazing. So, Mike, like for the listeners who want to connect with you, hear you speak, or learn more about your work and philosophy, where they can find you.
They can get me at Mike B, Mikeb, at REDZONERESOURCES.com. Again, that's Mike B at redzoneresources.com. And if they'll send an email, I'll respond. And again,
Amazing.
I just, I appreciate you letting me have the platform to speak today. I really do have a sense of gratitude towards that. I always look at it as an honor and a privilege to get the chance to forward and pass along the message, because I'm trying to pass it along so that, I don't like to use the word losses, but I like to use the word lessons. And if you can gain from some of the lessons that I learned, and make yourself more aerodynamic and more effective at what you're trying to do, and keep things even more in balance, I feel like I'm reaching the newfound levels that I'm trying to achieve now. It's not just about achieving goals that are extrinsic, it's about making other people better and giving back.
Lovely. So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links in the show notes for your easy reference. And with this hope, I would love to say that in a world that pushes us towards extremes, moderation, it can definitely feel radical. But sustainable performance, whether it's in relationship, health, business, is built on balance. Yeah. So here on Mind Meets Machine, we explore not just how to achieve, but how to achieve without losing ourselves in the process. That is much important, right? So, dear listeners, I'd say like if this conversation today resonated with you, share it with someone who is striving for more, and remind them that success doesn't have to cost everything else, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the thing I want everyone to take away from the conversation. I think some people lose it in translation, and I'm saying don't be successful. No, I want everyone to be as successful as they can be. I've reached certain goals and certain dreams and aspirations, and I want other people to achieve those things too, but not at the cost of your family and the other people that are important around you, or your colleagues think less of you when you walk in the door because they know you'll do anything it takes to achieve the success. I still think you can be successful and do it the right way. And there are a lot of examples. Well, there are probably less examples of those that have done it the right way than those that have done it at all costs. But you can do it with a sense of pride in yourself and how you accomplished it, and without having to sacrifice your your personal integrity to accomplish it. And that's what I'm trying to get across. I want everyone to be successful. I want everyone to see and achieve what they want to do, but it goes outside the workplace also. And I think what you try to achieve outside the workplace is going to make you better in the workplace. It's reciprocal. So that's what I'm trying to get across to people, and have them see that it's, one hand truly does wash the other. If you put time in the other slivers of the pie and enjoy those moments, it's going to make you more refreshed, more replenished. And when
Yeah,
you get back to the job, you're going to be able to perform it at a greater height and level.
definitely. Definitely true. So, dear listeners, with this hope, until next time, this is your host, Avik, and this is Mind Meets Machine. Pursue excellence and definitely protect what matters.
Thank you.